Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's Writers Chat. And this is where we like to gather together as writers and we talk about writing for writers and by writers. And we're really, really glad to see everybody here today because we're really going to talk a topic that I know about this much about. And I'm really looking forward to learning and stretching my writing muscles a little bit today, learning something new that's in a tool that's in our writing field. So we're excited to see everybody in the chat, and we're excited for those of you that have taken the time to watch the replay. Thank you, thank you, thank you for feeding your writer soul today and being with us. And it's fun to see Johnny and Brandy and Melissa with us today. And we have a special guest. I'm going to turn it over to Melissa to tell you about our topic today and introduce our guests. So, Melissa.
Right. Thank you so much, everybody. Well, it's my privilege today to introduce you a fellow author who I had the privilege of meeting through Historical Novel Society and interviewing him for his work in historical fiction. And Mark Baker is joining us today to talk about Substack. In his writing, he writes under the name G.M. Baker. I'm going to share his bio with you. G.M. Baker is trying to revive the serious popular novel, the kind of story that finds the truth of the human condition in action, adventure, romance, and even magic. He is the author of the historical novel series Cuthbert's People, The Wistful and the Good, St. Agnes and the Selkie, The Needle of Avocation, and the literary fairy tale Lady Isabel and the Elf Knight. He writes the newsletter Stories All the Way Down, which examines serious popular fiction in theory and practice. And you can subscribe to his newsletter at storiesallthewaydown.com. And that is, I believe, through the topic we're going to talk about today, right, Mark, on Substack?
That is on Substack, yeah.
Yes. So we're excited to learn about Substack today and what it offers authors and how you've benefited and learned from this platform. So yeah, take it away. We're anxious to hear from you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So Substack, I can, if people want me to, give some sort of brief demo of the interface, but that's not really the point because it's very easy to use. And so nobody who can set up a website or can use something like WordPress or something like that, nobody's going to have any trouble using Substack. So what I really want to talk about is the model, what they're trying to do, because I think this is what's really significant about them. Now, when I say that, I'm not here to be an advocate for the company or for that model. I think I'm up in the air about it myself. So I just want to explain it, and then we can have a conversation about the pluses and the minuses and whether it's going to work for different kinds of people. And there's going to be differences like between nonfiction and fiction, for instance, may work differently, things like that. And just, the attitude about how you want to work could make a difference. So I'm just going to try and lay out the model and the reason for it. We can talk about the technicalities if we want. The main thing that Substack is about, really, is the creator economy. I don't know how familiar people are with the term creator economy, but it's a term used for all the people who are sort of making a living through direct connection with customers online. And it includes YouTubers and people who sell crafts on Etsy. There's all sorts of ways in which people are now sort of making this direct connection. And I want to stress that it's not simply the same thing as saying self-publishing, because you can self-publish in a very traditional kind of way. I mean, you can go to a self-publishing company who will put the book, your book up on their website and put it on Amazon and all of that. And it works very much like a relationship with a publisher, or you can just put it up on Amazon yourself. And it's out there for strangers to find. but you don't make very much money off each of them. You need a lot of strangers to make that model work. The creator economy is much more about developing a connection with your audience, and making your living off that connection with that audience, where you're not dealing with strangers anymore. You're dealing directly with people. And there's many ways into this, and there's many degrees of it. Writers are encouraged to have newsletters, and that is that direct connection piece of it. But when we talk about Substack and the creator economy, it's about a little more than what a traditional author newsletter through something like MailChimp, for instance, would do. And that's the interesting part of it. So the traditional economy is a problem for authors, and I'm going to draw here extensively on a couple of articles that were published by Elle Griffin, of course, on Substack. In fact, all the things I'm going to refer to are things published on Substack. And Elle Griffin's become something of a Substack star. And mostly it started with these two articles she wrote in 2021, March 2021, and then another one in May. And the first one was called "No One Will Read Your Book and Other Truths About Publishing." And that was largely based on an interview with Rachel Dale, who is the news director of Publishers Weekly. And I probably just completely butchered her last name, which is Deahl. So if anybody has any clue how to pronounce that, you can tell us later. And then there was a follow-up, as I said, in May, and that was called "Writing Books is Not a Good Idea Because No One Really Buys Them." And both of these went absolutely viral. And they made Griffin one of the Substack success stories almost overnight. Now, Griffin's her background is as a journalist, and she's a really good journalist. She's a good tech journalist. She was working with the Utah Business Journal when she wrote this stuff. She's now kind of more or less independent based on its success, and that's part of the reason for talking about her. But I'm going to give you some of the stats from those articles, and I don't think they're going to be a big surprise to anybody. But her basic thesis is there are too many writers and there are not enough readers. So 98% of all books that publishers released in 2020 sold fewer than 5,000 copies. And that's traditionally published. 2.6 million books were sold online in 2020, and only 268 of them sold more than 100,000 copies. So that's 0.01% of books. By far the most likely thing is that book will sell between 0 and 1,000 copies. That's 96% of all the books last year. In traditional publishing, 80% of authors fail, and 20% that succeed pay for all the failures. Only 0.5% of books make the bestseller lists, and many of those only for a week. And most of that is the big 5 or 6 authors who have sat on that list for the last 20 years. The John Grishams of this world. Most books peak in 10 weeks and they're gone from the market. And, very few writers, if you look at how many people are trying to be writers, very, very few are making a living at it. She says there are a couple of thousand self-published authors that are currently earning 6-figure incomes, and a couple of dozen earning 7. And if you think about how many self-published authors there are these days. These are not good odds. And so she goes on to look at other models of author income, because all of that stuff before is based on the notion of I get a royalty for my book, which is 10, 12%, and then your agent takes 15% of that. You need to sell a lot of books that way. So she talks about serialization. In fact, her big push when she wrote this was to serialize her novel on Substack. So she goes into the numbers on serialization, and Dumas and Dickens got rich. I mean, the money they got per month for their serialized novels, which were looked down upon by all the critics at the time, but they got very rich doing it. And so there is precedent, there's good literary precedent for serializing a novel. And she talks about Andy Weir. He is the author of The Martian. You may remember, it was made into a movie about drawing a blank on the actor's name, but growing potatoes on Mars, basically.
Matt Damon.
Matt Damon, that's it. And Andy Weir serialized this on his blog. He had a technical blog because he's a techie. And he has serialized it on his blog. He then sold 35,000 copies at 99 cents on Amazon, then got picked up by Random House, then got a movie deal. So again, serialization has these interesting properties. It can build an audience. There, of course, always been these serialization platforms, as Wattpad and Royal Road. And there are people who make good money on Wattpad. There are people who make six-figure incomes on Wattpad. Mostly, though, they do it not through money from Wattpad. Wattpad does have some paid books, but mostly they do it through patronage. That is, they will set up a Patreon page, and people will pledge money to them. And generally what that gets them is earlier access. The patrons get it a little earlier than the general public. And so the patronage economy is starting to be a significant part of the creator economy. And there was a science fiction author, The Wheel of Time. So, somebody help me again with the author names. The author of The Wheel of Time. Anyway, he set up
Sophia says Brandon Sanderson.
That's the one. He set up a GoFundMe recently and made millions to go fund one of his books. Now, he's a company. He has a staff. He's got millions. He didn't need this money, but the patronage just flowed in. So this is, again, part of the model of building a list of followers and then monetizing the followers in various ways, through patronage, through selling direct, through selling multiple products. This guy called Kevin Kelly, I was smart enough to actually write his name down in my notes. And he is the author of the essay called 1,000 True Fans. And his idea is, if you can get 1,000 fans who like you well enough to spend $100 a year on your stuff, $100 a year times 1,000 fans is $100,000. That's a good income. And so his pitch to creators is worry less about trying to go wide and get, $1 a book from 100,000 readers. get $100 from 1,000 readers. Now, of course, you're not going to get that by simply selling them a book for $100. But you've got to think of other ways to get there. But one of the ways that this applies to Substack is that Substack lets you set up a paid newsletter. You can have a free newsletter with it, and it can just be a regular newsletter like anybody, most writers have. But you can also set up a paid newsletter. And if you can get 1,000 people to subscribe to your paid newsletter for a subscription of $5 a month, that's $60,000 a year. And there are a number of people who are making their living doing exactly that on Substack. There are people making millions doing that on Substack. Excuse me. So that's the creator economy aspect of the thing. And essentially, this is Elle Griffin's summing up of this. He says, using our current publishing model, if an author sells 1,000 copies of a book, he or she will earn $2,250 if published traditionally, or $4,200 if self-published. But using the creator economy model, an author could release a new book chapter every week, charge readers $9 a month subscription fee, and earn $108,000 a year from those same 1,000 readers. So that's the idea behind the creator economy model, is make more money off fewer readers by deepening the relationship with them, but also changing the economic model. So essentially, you're not giving most of the money to Amazon. In the case of Substack, you are giving them 10% of the subscription fee. And you get to keep the 90%. So now, this does loop back into traditional publishing as well, because if you can gain that kind of devoted following, that can also launch you into traditional publishing as well, which is what it did for Andy Weir, right? He had basically got a creator economy model going, and Random House came knocking on the door and said, hey. And so this is from Linda Dale again. It's a gamble. You will always have daydreams about why this book and why not that book, Dale says. You will always have more books failing than not. But the one thing we know for sure is that devoted fans make all the difference. Because whether a book is traditionally published, self-published, or serialized, alone, its odds of success are next to none. With a couple of thousand devoted fans, anything is possible. And I mean, this is not a message we haven't heard before, right? This is build your newsletter, build your platform. But we often hear that message in terms of build your platform so you can get the publisher interested. The creator economy is build your platform, build your audience, and monetize it yourself. And that fundamentally is what Substack is about. That's what it's for. Now, I'm not sure, is everybody on here a fiction writer, or is there a mix of nonfiction and fiction?
It's a mix.
It's a mix. The news for the nonfiction people is way better than it is for fiction people, which is, of course, true universally. But so I'm going to talk for a little bit about the fiction side of it, and about the people who are trying to serialize fiction and use Substack as a way to actually deliver their fiction. So, most author newsletters aren't using it to deliver the book, but there are some people who have done so. And Elle Griffin, who I talked about at the top, she's one of those people. And I'm one of them. Though I did it for free. So I didn't do it to make money off it. But there's another guy called Simon K. Jones. And he is trying to monetize it. He's not there yet, but he writes a lot of his Substack is sort of self-reflection on the process of trying to make money on this. And he wrote an article called Why I Left Wattpad for Substack. It is, of course, like everything I'm citing, on Substack. And his subtitle is Taking Control of My Writing Platform. And it's that element of control that you'll see emphasized over and over again. Control of the platform, control of the audience. So what he says is building an author platform used to mean building a social media presence. But his contention is social media, the traditional stuff, Twitter, Facebook, doesn't work anymore. And the rationale is they are algorithmically driven, and they're algorithmically driven to keep readers in the walled garden, keep them reading ads, because it's through ads that these companies make money. So they have no motive to send people out to your content. In fact, there's been a bit of a kerfuffle because Twitter has recently actually targeted Substack and refused to distribute tweets that point to Substack. This is Elon Musk thrashing, right? He's trying all sorts of stuff. So this comes and goes. But I decided I'd look into this myself. Now, I have about 1,000 Twitter followers. I don't tweet that much, but I've got 1,000 followers that I've developed over 10 or 12 years. So I went and looked at my tweet analytics, and I discovered that when I tweet links to my work, I get about 40 impressions. So 1,000 Twitter followers, and my tweets get 40 impressions. This really isn't helping. Also, Substack gives you a breakdown of where people are coming from. And the number of people I get coming to my Substack from Twitter is minuscule. Now, you guys also interviewed Thomas Umstadt. Again, another name I'm probably getting wrong. And he too talked about the futility of social media. And that was a really fascinating interview that you guys did with him. And blogs are becoming an issue as well, because blog readership is down. And Simon K. Jones says, he had shut down the blog on his personal website because no one was reading it. Everybody was going to Substack. And when I first started on Substack, I did an experiment. I had been writing a blog for a long time. So I had a blog on my personal website. It had a fair number of people. It was new. It wasn't the 4,000 people I had on my old tech blog. It was my fairly new fiction blog. But I thought it was doing okay and growing okay. So I said, okay, I'm going to run the newsletter on Substack. I'm going to keep my blog. I'm going to have Substack point back to my blog when there's something of interest. And I'll run them side by side and see what happens. And the trajectory of subscriptions to my blog kind of did this. And the trajectory of subscriptions to my Substack did that. And it soon became clear that for whatever reason, and even though, I was I had Google page ranking and everything on my blog, and that's where people knew me, didn't matter. It was the Substack that took off. So I said, okay, folding the blog, it's all going into Substack. And let's just continue to grow from that. And the other point that Simon Jones makes, it's an important one. He says, it's 2023 and I'm all in on Substack. That might not be the case forever, but that's okay because I own my subscriber list and all of my content. There's no awkward contracts. There's no lock-in. This is what building an author platform really looks like. In other words, you're in control of it. You've got the tech given to you. And if you decide to go paid, then you're paying them 10% the privilege. But you still own it. You own the content, you own the contacts. There aren't algorithms that are, driving attention. And then he ends his article with making the same creator economy point. He says it's not about the biggest numbers anymore. It's about high quality interactions, deeper and more rewarding conversations with readers and writers. And that's really the key theme of a creator economy: smaller numbers, higher quality interaction. And that's what Substack was designed to do. And then quoting one more Substack, and this one is from Hamish McKenzie, who's one of the 3 founders of Substack. And his basic pitch is direct relationships are the future. That's what it's set up for. And so he says, unlike other online media platforms, we don't seek to lock our customers into a walled garden by controlling their relationship with their audience. On Substack, writers own and control their mailing lists and their content, and they choose to leave when they can take their paid subscribers with them. And he makes an important point, I think, about content moderation. Because naturally, there's been criticism of Substack because somebody on Substack in one of their newsletters said something some activist somewhere didn't like, which will happen about 10 seconds after you put your head above water on the web. And so they've had this. He makes this point about content moderation, that Substack and Twitter, well, not Twitter anymore because they all got fired, but Facebook has a huge moderation staff. But they're essentially in a losing battle because their own algorithms, which are driving attention, that pulls all the controversial stuff to the fore. It pulls it in. So the point that Hamish McKenzie makes about the Substack model is there is no advertising, so there is no algorithm that's trying to drive eyeballs. And he says, Substack is part of a seismic shift in the media economy that gives more power to writers and creators. The writers are in charge. They can have direct relationship with the readers, do the work they believe is most important, have the potential to make far more money than they could from other venues, where others reap the majority of the benefits. Other venues where others reap the majority of the benefit from their work. So, and his point on content moderation is, instead of trying in vain to strike the elusive content moderation policy that improves rather than flames our broken discourse, we are addressing the problem at the root by changing the business model on which the media ecosystem is built. That means we're building a system where money made by writers, not attention that is harvested by algorithms, drives the whole economy. So in other words, there's no algorithm forcing stuff you don't want to see at you. If you don't want to subscribe to somebody's newsletter because you don't like them, unsubscribe. Nothing is ever going to push anything at you that you don't want to see. So that's really the important stuff about Substack. It's about that level of control. It's got far more stuff in it than a newsletter platform like MailChimp. MailChimp has some stuff that Substack doesn't. Substack doesn't give you a way to do an onboarding sequence or that kind of thing, because it isn't aimed at marketers. It's aimed at content creators. But they have various systems to help you build an audience. And they claim, and I think it's probably about true for me, that about 30 to 40% of all newsletter growth comes internally from their own system, which is mostly based on recommendations. So a newsletter can recommend other newsletters and explain why. And so, again, there's no algorithm here. This is human beings recommending other human beings and explaining why. It's both a newsletter and a blog. In other words, by default, there is an interface on the web where all of your stuff goes up that looks like a blog. And I can do a little bit of screen sharing in a minute and show you what that looks like. So you get a blog, you get the newsletter. They also do podcast hosting. So you can host a podcast there. And I saw just the other day, some figures saying that podcasting is where all the attention is going these days. So podcasting is significant. Sorry, I got a signal that I didn't understand. Okay. They also have a feature called Notes, which is some way similar to Twitter, which is why Twitter got mad at them. But it's for sharing shorter things. And they have a chat feature where you can enable chat around each of your newsletters, and then you can have comments as well, but the chat feature is more sort of it's kind of like having a Discord, right? I don't know how
It
many
sounds like a
people
really great way to connect with your subscribers.
Yes.
And build that organic connection.
Exactly. It's got all the bits of doing that through the blog, through the newsletter, through the notes, through the chat, through the podcast hosting. It's really bringing all of those things together and putting them into one subscriber list. You can also, by the way, make Substack your personal website if you want to. You can use a custom domain. As Melissa mentioned at the beginning, my main Substack, I actually have 3, though I think I'm going to consolidate them. But my main one is storiesallthewaydown.com, which is simply a custom domain pointing to Substack. So there are people whose only website is their Substack, because you can do, if you want to have a blog focused website, you can do it on Substack. And technically speaking, you can do it completely for free, because the only way they make money is off subscriptions. So right now, everything else is free. I have not paid them a single cent. And they have done all this stuff, and it's just there to use. You'll get some stuff from them saying, hey, have you thought about going paid yet? But other than that, minor nags like that, it's free. It's great. So this is probably a good time to pause for questions and to see, if people want to look at the thing or talk about the pros and cons that it's had for me. I can do that too, but I think I'll hand it over for questions at this point and then see where it goes.
I have like two questions. Since you're just talking about website and one of my questions was, how do you integrate your Substack subscriber and all of your content there with a separate personal website? Maybe you already have an author website that's separate and established. So what's a good way to put the two of them together so they work well together?
All I have done is have a menu item in each that points to the other.
Okay, that makes sense. Yep.
I think you could probably set up an RSS feed
Mm-hmm.
on your main website to show your Substack. I'm pretty sure you can do that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Feed.
Yep. Yep.
But I haven't done that because basically I haven't paid much attention to my website since I got on Substack. So.
My other question was, how does a newer person start a Substack and gain attention to begin getting subscribers with the goal of eventually monetizing? Because, initially you come in, it's kind of like a blog. You start a blog for brand new, nobody knows you, and getting those initial followers can be really difficult. What is your recommendation for someone new coming in?
There are certain features. Substack itself has a weekly thing called office hours, which is essentially they will announce a topic and then just using the regular Substack interface, people comment on that. And they ask questions like, how do I, increase my followers and that kind of thing. But the thing about that is that if you contribute to the conversation on the office hours, you will get subscribers just from that. Commenting on other people's blogs has always been a way to build a blog audience, and that still works. And it works on Substack. You can comment on other people's Substacks. So you follow a bunch of people, you comment on them, and often if you do that, then they'll give you a recommendation.
So it kind of works almost like the traditional old blog ring.
Yeah, really. It is set up to give this network effect. But you always have this problem of priming the pump. There is a Discord server called, let me give you the exact name. Substack Writers Unite. This was created by Elle Griffin back in the day. Back in the day was 2 years ago, which is ancient history. So Substack Writers Unite on Discord. I can make sure I'm getting the right one here. I'm trying to grab the right part of the URL. Let's see.
If you're actually in that server, you can probably go to the little drop down where the server name is and click on invite people, and that will probably give you a link.
Yep. So here we go. We're all invited.
Awesome. Yay. Thank you.
There used to be one specifically for fiction, but that kind of seemed to die. For the fiction people, though, see if I can find this quickly without somebody tap dance or something to fill the dead air while I find this.
We did have a couple people who were interested in seeing the interface if we have time for that.
I'd love that.
Sure.
Yeah. And you already answered one of my questions, was just curiosity as to why or how Substack differed from other newsletter platforms like MailChimp or MailerLite or ConvertKit. And so that opens up a lot of possibilities for people who would like a I guess for lack of a better description, an all-in-one source to go to that doesn't have all the technical bells and whistles that they really don't want to take the time to learn. They can focus more on their craft and building their audience on a platform like Substack and not have to worry about all of the onboarding or the technical ends of building their websites and their newsletters. That it really is a very writer-friendly platform.
It really is. And I mean, you know, they're big names. Chuck Harris, the guy who wrote Fight Club, George Sanders of Lincoln in the Bardo, Salman Rushdie is on there. Now, their biggest hits come from journalists. An awful lot of journalists who were laid off from major media and essentially took their audience and went to Substack. And so that's where you'll find a lot of the big stars that their first audience is journalists. But I have just put another link in the chat, which is to Fictionistas, which is a group of fiction writers on Substack, including me, who give each other help and support, and they run contests. They run something called the Great Substack Story Challenge, something like that, which is the way it works. And I was like second in the first round of this. Is that there's everybody who wants to be involved writes a kind of an opening line or something like this, and then those go into a lottery, and somebody is assigned as the first person, and they give them the opening line, and then they write a short story, or no, they write an episode of a serial, and then the next person in line only sees that when it's published, and they have 1 week then to write the next and the next and the next and the next. And so it's like totally on the fly. You do not know what you're going to get to deal with. And that is actually still 18 months later, I think, something like that, is my third highest ranking post, is my contribution to the Great Substack Story Challenge. And they've also done a Great Substack Prompt Challenge and things like this. And again, this is a way you build an audience, right? Because then, you know, there was some people in that challenge who had very large audiences. So their people see their episode and they go, oh, I need to read the rest of this. And they end up on everybody else's Substack. And I could point to the, you know, my subscriber graph after mine went, and while the whole thing was on, mine was growing, because people were going back and go, oh, okay, that was good. So they do a lot of stuff like this, but it's all person to person. It's not an algorithm. You're not fighting with an algorithm or trying to fool an algorithm or anything like that. That's what's really refreshing about
I like that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think you're a co-host. So if you want to share your screen and can do that and just give us a little quick look at what it looks like. If I've been on Substack, it has been ages ago. Like, I don't even know if I have an account there or not. So I'm eager to see what you've got and to actually try this out.
Okay, so here we are. This is Fictionistas, actually.
Okay.
There's the Great Substack Story Challenge Part 2. I wasn't in Part 2 because there were so many different people, but you can see here that here are all the parts. Oh, including, I didn't realize that Elle had contributed a chapter. So we can go from there, and suddenly I'm in Elle Griffin's Substack. where all of this stuff came from. And this is my inbox. So this is a list of all the Substacks that I subscribe to, and their latest posts. This is Notes, which is their Twitter equivalent, though it's much more civilized than Twitter. And I haven't really done anything with chat, so there won't be anything much in the chat. What I'm going to do now, though, is I'm going to switch over to my own dashboard. So this is my interface as a writer, and it's giving me my list of posts and the basic stats. So the total number of views, the open rate on the emails. Open rate is not a reliable metric because it relies on exactly how a mail client works, and a lot of them just don't report back. So mostly your open rate's higher than what's shown. But I can see how many recipients actually saw that email and opened it, number of views, which comes from different places. It tells me my traffic sources, 87% on this one were from email, 6% were direct. Direct is a fancy technical word meaning they don't know. 4% came from the Substack app because Substack has its own iOS and Android app as well. 1% came from LinkedIn. My most successful social media is actually LinkedIn. And then less than 1% comes from other. So the number of times I see Facebook or Twitter show up as sources, it hardly ever happens. I can also tell what links people clicked on in each post. So 8 people clicked on a link, and which link it was, all that kind of stuff. Over here, I have my list of drafts. So this is the authoring interface. I do everything in dark mode, by the way, but it has a light mode as well. And so this is authoring, and it's just, I've got the table of content, I've got the title, subtitle, authors, you can have multiple authors. And then it's just a simple writing interface. There's not a lot of fancy stuff. You can put in graphics, but it is very deliberately simple. If you're looking to do some really high design kind of stuff, Substack really isn't designed for that. It's designed to be simple, easy to use, straightforward, and clean and neat. But you can do the regular stuff. You can add audio and video. You can actually record the audio right in Substack if you want, and you could record your video in Substack. But it's simple stuff, right? There's no difficulty here. So I'm going to go back to the here. If I had a podcast, which I haven't started yet, that would be created there. This is my subscriber list. It shows me the arc. It's you may not be able to see that. I'm not sure how well it's coming through, but it shows me the development of my subscribers, so I know exactly where they came from. I have a list. The stars tell me which ones are my most active. So when people read, click on links, comment, so right away I know that whoever this person is, they really interact. And I can see there's a bunch of people who haven't interacted yet. That's mostly because there hasn't been anything for them to react to yet. But if I want to know who are my most active subscribers, who are my biggest fans, I click on the activity tab, and boom, there it is. These are my most active how many times they've opened an email, where they came from. So I've got really good, useful stats to understand where my base is coming from. Recommendations tab shows me all the publications that recommend me, which is kind of cool. I didn't realize there were 13 of them. That's nice. And then these are the ones that I recommend. And yeah, I get subscribers, one or two at a time, but they come through that. And then the general settings are here. And that's where you set up things like your headers and your footers and all kinds of stuff. I have no point in running through that. But you can set up how your home page looks like. And this is what my homepage looks like. Substack offers about half a dozen different layouts. This is what they call the magazine layout. This is a serious popular fiction is kind of my tagline. So I have the post I did on it has been pinned, and so it's the first post. Now, if you're going to use Substack as your main website, you might pin a post about your books there. So people say, boom, there's the books. Mm-hmm. It does let you list your books in your profile. So that's nice. And then these are the more recent posts over here. Most popular posts over here. There's my contribution to the Great Substack Story Challenge is sitting there. And then your recommendations, all this kind of stuff. And basically, the Find Me section here has the connection to my other places, other places to find me, essentially. And I'm looking at that and thinking, oh, I need to update that. So I shall do that soon.
You have got a couple of questions in the chat.
Yes.
Leslie asked. Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, ask the question. I'll decide whether to stop sharing to answer it or not, I guess.
Leslie asked, do you suggest starting on Substack to build your platform before you actually release your books? And can you share your posts on Substack to other social media platforms like Facebook, maybe Instagram, etc.?
I'm not the marketing expert. That seems like a good way to go to me. Build an audience before you release. But I am the least adept marketer you're likely to meet in a month of Sundays. Just am. I mean, marketing requires that attention. You've got to keep feeding it, and you've got to keep examining, where is this coming from? And it's just, my mind just goes and writes stories for weeks on end and doesn't look at any of that. So.
Totally understand that.
Yeah, I'm not the best person to advise you on that part of it. Can you share it? Yeah, it's just like, and it will give you buttons, actually. It will give you buttons to help you share. And it will, when you publish something, it will send you back an email with some graphics that you can use to post to other media. They're not that great, honestly. If I'm honest, I don't think they're all that fantastic, but they're doing something for you.
Yeah.
They'll kind of pull a graphic out of your post and write some text across it, but it saves you a little bit of effort. So yeah, they do help you with that. They used to be really tightly integrated with Twitter, but I think that's gone by the wayside now. So I don't care, because I looked up how many impressions I was getting of my tweets on Twitter and don't care.
Sophia had a good question that you might have some input on too. She said, is Substack genre influenced? Like, I can see it working well for sci-fi, but do fans of less speculative fiction genres show up there? if you see certain genres who seem to be popular. I know you mentioned like it favors the nonfiction and the journalist, but are there some thriving genre specific, I guess, sources on Substack that are kind of making
it seems to me that it's always romance and sci-fi fantasy. If you're talking about online markets, right? And that's its demographic. The demographic that will be on the next thing right away is the demographic that wants those particular kinds of books. So as an historical novelist, no, my audience this isn't the ideal location of my audience. I honestly don't know what is. In terms of that audience just isn't as online. They're online, but they're not online, right? So
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, I always say, marketing is mostly about figuring out what book you should be writing before you write it. And I didn't do that. Historical fiction is about certain periods. You want to make a debut splash in historical fiction. You write about a plucky girl fighting Hitler in World War II. You write about Anne Boleyn or anybody who ever knew Anne Boleyn. Those are the biggies of biggies, and then there are other ones. You do not write about 8th century Anglo-Saxon thanes' daughters. You can write about big, beefy Anglo-Saxon warriors fighting big, beefy Viking warriors, but you do not write about what is essentially a middle-class teenager in the 8th century. But I did, so, you know, that's what I know about marketing.
Probably it's the top of the hour, so we probably do need to wrap up. John, were you saying something?
I just said already. I didn't realize what time it was.
But Mark, this has been fascinating, and I do want to tell you, why don't you unscreen share so we can go back here as we finish up. But I do want to I really appreciate you talking and explaining creator content, content creator, because that is a term that's really out right now that I think many writers are not as familiar with. I listened to Joe Pelusi's podcast, Content Inc., and he uses that line all the time. That's what got me a little more familiar with it. But you really got us thinking about that. So I do really appreciate that on that. Well, before we finalize, and I'll let Melissa do the final thank you and all that. Johnny, next week we've got book pub ads. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, thank you. I was just looking up to see what was going on next week. Brenda Anderson will be with us to talk about how she's had some success with doing not necessarily book bub ads, but book bub special deals and things like that, where she'll put her book on a, you know, like a 99-cent price for a while. And she does write series, so she's able to like put the first book in the series down. So she's just going to give us some tips and overviews on how that strategy has worked for her. And she's an indie author, and it has worked, and there's some legs to that. So I'm really excited to have Brenda with us next week to talk about a topic I don't really think we've discussed on here before. So it'll be fun.
So we're going to have kind of back-to-back new tools.
Yeah, because today was a brand new one, I think, for us too. And Mark, thank you. That was just, I took lots of notes.
But it was useful.
Now that we can go explore and have a little bit of knowledge base. So I really appreciate it. Do you want to wrap up a little bit for us, Melissa?
Sure. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us, Mark. This has been great, and really got the wheels turning as to the possibilities with Substack. I know that there's a lot of people in the chat just really, really adding to it and commenting and interested in this, and thanking you for taking the time to join us on Writers Chat today. I think there's going to be a lot of people jumping over to check Substack out after this. And yeah, thank you for joining us, for sharing with us. We look forward to hearing more, and I think we'll encourage everybody to go check out Mark's work on Substack too, and see if you can build a community there. And feel free, for those who are with us live, to join us in the after party, and for those watching, you can find the replay on YouTube and Serious Writers channel.
Thank you, everybody. Bye now. Keep writing. Bye now.
Bye-bye.